Okay, so good evening and greetings to all of you. A very warm welcome to this event, a very special event on human wisdom. And thank you so much for your time and interest in joining us. This is an amazing event for many reasons. One, because it gives you an insight of many aspects of our basic existence, which is all being human. And the other is, how do we deal with the humans around us? That's a great wisdom that we all need to learn and cherish. I'm Sudha Kolluru, and I'm a personal and professional performance acceleration coach, where I deal with emotional intelligence, communication, and leadership. I work with corporates, educational institutes, and trust me, I love my work. And one of the reason why this program, with my 20 plus years of experience as a trainer and a coach, this program stands out to me. Because it not only helps me learn and share many aspects of our core existence, but also gives me the pleasure of understanding myself to a whole different level. It's like an illumination or a realization in itself. Recently, I was very fortunate with Dr. Manoj Krishna to undergo a certified human wisdom training program. Now, at the beginning, when he shared this, I was like, oh my God, 2 days back to back, my weekend. How are we even going to manage sitting in front of this virtual session? But trust me, guys, it just happened in a flash. We didn't even realize because the kind of connect, the engagement, the learning, and the understanding was so beautiful. It was so deep and it was so profound that we didn't realize. And we came out with a different perspective towards ourselves and things around us. So it was an enlightenment in its true sense. Let me take the pleasure of sharing some insights and learnings that I've had, fortunately, in this training program. First of all, Dr. Manoj told us about these 5 pillars. To begin with, how do we nurture our quiet mind? How do we develop that self-awareness? And there are techniques to that where we practice breathing, journaling, and meditation. So all these aspects help us align our thought process and calm our mind to a great extent. And that was discussed in depth. And then the second pillar would be the art of inquiry. And like Manoj was just saying a few minutes ago, the art of asking the right questions is the secret to find your right answers. So having understood that, what is this right question? So first we observe, we develop curiosity, and then we have an open mind to the learning, and after which we take ownership of what we learn. And finally, we make a commitment as how we can change in order to transform ourselves for the better. So the entire perspective of how we look at us, things around us, ask the right questions, and seek the right answers is what really matters. And that's a technique, a procedure, and a learning that we share deeply in this program. And moving on, the third pillar is all about emotions. Now, what makes us human? It's all about emotions. And how do we manage them? Unfortunately, the answer is we don't know how to manage them. So first we understand how we manage or get aware of our own emotions and then deal with them. And then the emotions around us. Now, there are a lot of negative emotions more than the positive. Well, they're equal actually, but the fact that we dwell more on the negative aspects, like we have fear. Fear is nothing but a state of imagination, anticipation of what may or what may not be. And how do we control that or understand that better? Fear is one aspect which stops us from success and different achievements in life. We may have the potential, but we may be too much afraid to achieve that, to go to that next level and explore our potential levels, right? Then we have attachment to our identity, attachment to things, our position, our experience, etc. And that deprives us, unfortunately, to look at things in a better way, have compassion for our fellow members. And then we have identity crisis, then we have suffering, pain, jealousy of how and why things are different, people are different around us. So all these emotions exist. The main idea here is to understand, accept, acknowledge, and overcome them. And that's what we work towards. And understanding the fact, like as we have negative emotions, we also have a lot of positive emotions, and these are nothing but your compassion, your care, your understanding, your concern, for empathy for people around you. And this is the secret for better relationships. Relationships is one aspect. I am very sure and confident that everybody is still learning, and the process continues in order to have the best and the perfect relationship, whatever the relationship may be. But what are the hurdles, and how do we understand the other person and make ourselves better in this entire relation? So that's what we will be looking into. The other main aspect, which really came across strongly to me, is stress. Stress is something in today's time. It could be the pandemic, it could be the work, it could be personal issues, professional, whatever you name it. As simple as kids, parenting, education, etc. We are all under stress, and there's different forms of stress. So identifying the factors which trigger that stress becomes our key area of focus. And then we work on how we can overcome these. So basically, stress is nothing but limiting our understanding or ability in order to manage ourselves, and then finding ways in order to release ourselves from all that negative energies which are pent up inside us. So how do we deal with that? That's a very interesting and an important question that we will be exploring and finding answers to. Moving on, the fourth pillar is how do we change the pattern of thinking? Now that we know how to quiet our mind, and then how to ask the right questions, how to understand our emotions, the fourth pillar is very important in changing the pattern of our thinking, our thoughts, which could be dangerous, which could be, leading us to success or failure. We wouldn't know. But how do we manage that? Right. So there are certain patterns where we recondition, right? We recondition the limitations that we have, and go in a manner where we can change the perception towards things. In other words, I would just say, learn to understand without language, learn to speak without language. Isn't that a beautiful concept? And I love this coming from Dr. Manoj, because he puts it across in the most blissful way possible. He says, learn to speak without language, right? And the fifth and the most important pillar would be to apply this wisdom to our day-to-day life. And that's what makes our life better. Okay, so having understood these five pillars, and also knowing how to apply them in different verticals and different ways in our life, is an important way that we can develop our human wisdom. It was a great learning for me, and I feel privileged and greatly honored not only to host this event, but also be an official coach of this entire program. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce the man behind all this, the founder, the one who has spent 33 decades of his life, his career, as a professional doctor. He is a spine surgeon working in the UK, and all of a sudden, he had a bolt of enlightenment after those 30 years that there is something different that we all need to look into. Change the way we look and do things around us. And that is what will bring peace, happiness, and pleasure into our life. And that is where the entire idea, the vision of human wisdom was born. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Dr. Manoj Krishna, who is the founder, the visionary, and the main conceiver of this entire amazing project of human wisdom. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And welcome, all of us. Underneath all our different layers of skin color, nationality, profession, we're the same human being. And all we're doing in this program, in this project, is exploring our shared humanity. But there is just so much to find and discover that has been almost hidden from us. It's a bit like saying, you see the top of the ocean, but it's only when you go down and dive deep, you make such amazing discoveries that you never knew existed just from the surface. So there are a few core ideas behind this program. One is that, just like our hearts work in the same way, so do our minds. And just as studying the way the heart worked allowed us to prevent and overcome so many problems linked to the heart, so understanding the way our mind works does the same thing. as Sudha said, asking questions is the key to unlocking this wisdom. So, for example, a simple question. Say you're born on this side of the street in Belfast, I'm on the other side of the street. You're Catholic, I'm Protestant. We grow up hating each other. We never ask why. We never do. Why do we hate people we've never met? Of a different skin color, ideology, political persuasion, religion, doesn't matter what it is, gender. And when you ask why, you realize that actually we've both been conditioned by our particular influences, but we're not aware of it. And yet we become attached to those ideas that we've grown up with. But this is the same in you and in me. We've just read a different storybook and got attached to it. And that storybook has taught us to hate each other. And when we see that clearly, we put our knives down. We say, that's not intelligent. So for me, the aha moment came when I'd finished a long day in surgery and I was driving home from work. And there's a hospital in the Middle East that had been bombed, the children's hospital. The kids were screaming. It was on the radio. And I just had this strong feeling that we human beings can do better. We need to do better, and we can do better. And it's a really simple, the understanding that could unlock the door to wisdom, to peace, is really simple, which is that you and I are just different. We're not, you're not, we've just been conditioned differently, and we become attached to that conditioning. So that's what creates all our identities, which we become attached to. And you're Jewish, I'm Palestinian, you're Hindu, I'm Muslim, you're Shia, I'm Sunni, and so on. And I thought if we could scale this to the world, it would make such a difference. So then I left medicine. I wrote a book. I left medicine. I started working in schools with children. And Dominic, you'll know, you've been in primary school, how wonderfully wise little children are. So I would sit down with them and I'd just say, look, you and I are the same human being. I've just come to learn with you. I've got gray hair, but we're just going to share and learn together. And I've recorded all those conversations on film. And I'm happy to share them with anyone who's interested. But that's when I realized that we have something magical, that this wisdom is already inside children and inside adults and is just waiting to be awakened or unlocked. And you just do that by asking questions. So for example, if I asked children, I said, what is the root cause of fear? After just half an hour of conversation, they'd say, it's your imagination playing up. So I was in the school in Leeds and I spoke to them for an hour and we came to this understanding. I went back 4 months later and I said, we talked about fear 4 months ago. What difference did it make to your life? And this boy said, my grandfather died and I became frightened that my parents would die as well. And then I remembered that fear is just your imagination playing up. And my fear went away. Or I asked, how when, say, you've been on this amazing holiday and you're telling me about it and I'm your best friend, I'd say to children, what are you thinking? And they'd say, well, I'm feeling jealous. I don't want to feel jealous because you're my best friend, but I'm actually feeling really jealous. And I said, what does that jealousy make you do? And they said, well, it makes us, I don't like you anymore. I want to withdraw. I think you're showing off and all of those things. And I said, is it being caused by their holiday or something going on in your own thinking? And then they realize, our mind compares all the time, see? And it's unconscious, we're not aware of it. So the human mind is comparing all the time. And that comparison is what's causing my envy, my low self-esteem. And from that envy and the hurt of it comes anger, and from that anger comes violence and all of those things that follow. So I talked to these children and I asked a simple question. I said, how would our life change if our mind didn't unconsciously and automatically compare itself with others all the time? And this girl at the back, who's only 13, she said, I would be free. So this understanding of the way our mind works is really powerful, but it's also extremely simple. It's been there right under our noses all the time, but we haven't seen it. But once you become aware of it, the implications of that are profound. So when I asked children, I said, how can we end war? Now that you understand conditioning and, and the differences and so on, how can we end war? Before that, I said, okay, we're in and children are beautiful because they're so open and honest. So I said, you go into a class and half the children are black and half are white, and you're black, where will you go and sit? And they said, well, go sit with the black children. So why is that? Why can't you sit with the white kids? Oh, because it makes me feel more comfortable. I feel less threatened, see? And so I said, what do you think is going to happen in 3 months? He says, well, we'll start a tribe will form. And then I said, what's going to happen next? And they said, well, we'll start getting into arguments. And if you're a country, I said, what's going to happen? They said, we'll go to war. So I said, what's the answer? And they said, we have to talk to people. We have to connect with people who are different to us, even though it's outside our comfort zone. So when you talk to children, they really have all the answers. But the key is to ask them the right questions and to ask ourselves the same questions, which we don't do. So I said to them, what's the answer then to end war? And you know what they said to me? They said, to realize we are the same ice cream, just different flavors. Right? Chocolate ice cream would never go to war with vanilla ice cream because it was different. Would never want vanilla ice cream to be, become chocolate ice cream, or become jealous of vanilla ice cream because it was vanilla and I was chocolate. You see how ridiculous all that sounds, but that's what the human mind's doing all the time in the background without our awareness. The other big idea behind this project is every problem for which humanity at the moment has no solution begins in our thinking. Whether it's mental health problems, or addiction, or violence, or relationship breakdown, or unhappiness, or even climate change. Because climate change comes from human behavior, which comes from human thinking. And as Sudha said, unless we change that thinking, we're not going to solve these problems. So all of these problems have one common root, which is they begin in our thinking. So if we're going to address them, we need to begin by understanding their roots and their origins in our thinking process, which is what the project can do. This is what we're doing in this project. So at a stroke, if you live with this wisdom, which is you live with this deeper understanding of yourself and how your mind functions, you can not only overcome, but you can avoid stress and anxiety and relationship breakdown. See, at the moment, nobody ever thinks that it's possible to avoid stress. Half the people who get married are going to get divorced. And yet everybody who gets married wants it to last forever. So why is it that despite our best intentions, we're not able to have these long-term relationships, which are really healthy? And again, this deeper understanding of ourselves and how our mind functions can allow all of that to occur. So our vision is this, that by sharing this understanding around the world, we can help people live with wisdom, which can not only help transform their own lives, so they live without stress and anxiety and all that, but it can also bring peace to the world. And in a generation, we can start addressing some of these existential challenges that humanity faces, for which at the moment we don't seem to have a solution. And one of the things we're doing so we've created this app, which I'm going to show you in a second. We're training or collaborating with life coaches around the world, in America, the UK, Europe, Australia, and India. And they're all going through the same training program, and they're going to help guide our users to help them discover, because this wisdom doesn't come from outside. It's already in you. It just needs to be discovered by you. And so we already have finished 3 training programs, and Sushma has been on the Indian one, Gopalan has been on the Australian one, Gopalan's in Singapore. Do you want to say something, Gopalan? Do you want to just share your 2 pennies about the time we had together in Australia?
Yeah, unlike Sudha, we had 4 days.
Yes, you had.
So the 2 days should be appreciated. Yeah, and I felt that the 4 days was so intense, yet the energy in the breakout rooms was awesome. The sharing from our colleagues in Australia and New Zealand, and we had Middle East as well, right? Dubai or something, yeah. And it was an amazing session across 4 days, 2 weekends, Saturday, Sundays. And the good thing was we were able, I don't know, Manoj, it was more like you were able to really identify the coaches who would really bring this forward. So I didn't find any coach in there who was not in alignment to how human wisdom can impact lives. Everybody was so aligned to the whole concept of human wisdom and how it can be applied across the globe.
That's been the really beautiful thing, that I've met people from different countries, different skin color, religions, nationalities, but somehow this idea of coming together as one humanity and having this depth of understanding so it can not only help transform our own lives, but the world, is really powerful. And actually, what we're doing is we're just shining a light to illuminate areas of our thinking that are hidden from our own understanding and awareness. And that illumination brings its own transformation. So it's not based on any ideology or religion or book or anything. It's just an invitation for help to you to understand yourself better. And that's going to awaken your own wisdom and transform your own life. And unlike everything else, this approach can prevent problems as much as solve them. So let me just share the app, and you'll get a much better idea of what we're talking about here. Okay, so it's a web app, so it's on the desktop, it's on your laptop, but it's also visible on the phone. It'll be on the app stores and so on. It's wisdom in your pocket. It's got 59 modules. And the key word is it changes your life from the inside for lasting benefit to unlock your potential. So it allows you to be the best version of yourself, be happy, less stressed and anxious, have healthy relationships, and live with a sense of peace and compassion. Compassion comes because the more you understand yourself, the more you realize the other person is the same person you are. And that understanding brings compassion. So let me tell you a story, which I'm sorry you've heard before, Sudha and Gopalan, but for everyone else. That I was in a school in Newcastle, and I gave this talk, and at the end, a lady came to me and was crying. And she said that this understanding had helped her to forgive her parents for what they'd done. And I said, what was that? And she said she'd married someone of a different skin color, and they had refused to accept him. So for 20 years, they hadn't spoken. The grandchildren hadn't met the parents. There'd been heartache on all sides. But suddenly she understood that their actions came from their unconscious conditioning after the war. And the reason she was able to respond with compassion is because she was the same. That her thoughts and her opinions and her beliefs also came from her conditioning, and she wasn't aware of that. So even though she didn't agree with them, she understood why. And that understanding awakens compassion. So that's the other big benefit of living with this wisdom. So the app, we've got a number of stories which people connect with. So we've got about 100 stories from around the world. This one is about a boy who had a temper, and his grandfather helped him to get over it. And then from there, you can go straight into exploring the anger module if you're interested. So the stories are connected directly, and you can also submit your own story. There's an online journal. There's an online forum. There's a survey where you can track your progress. So you fill in 10 questions, you'll get a wisdom score. And then from that, you can keep track of your own progress. And we've got a whole range of podcasts which we record. So how can we live with compassion is the last one, or overcome grief. And if you're an educator, Dominique, you might like this dialogue I had with an 8-year-old girl on wisdom. Or for Steve, I know you have older children in your college. Why do we follow trends? And conversation with a 16-year-old. But there are also other ones on responding to COVID-19 and so on. So have a look at that. So let's have a look at what are the benefits of living with wisdom. So Sophocles said our happiness depends on our wisdom. And Aristotle that wisdom comes from knowing yourself. So if you want to live a happy life, knowing yourself is the root cause of it. But in more modern times, so David Attenborough has said that if we humans are to continue, we need more than intelligence. We need wisdom. If we are to save our planet, because we are the only species destroying our own habitat, knowing we're doing so, and are unable to stop ourselves. And it's because of the whole underlying patterns of our thinking that we're not aware of. So we have these small mini podcasts. Welcome, and you can also see the text of that there. Small videos. And to begin, we just need curiosity. Like a child has automatically, but we forget as adults because our heads are full of so much knowledge. We need a spirit of learning, which we again have forgotten, and a mind that's open to learning about ourselves. Bit of enthusiasm and commitment, like you're learning a musical instrument, and that's all you need. Throughout, we have these reflection screens. So by writing down what you're thinking, it taps into a different area of your brain, and again, awakens that wisdom in yourself. So, okay. So that's the benefits in terms of discovering wisdom and so on. So this is the introduction. Then we've got these short 10-minute videos on how we can use wisdom to overcome the acute challenges we're facing. So say you're experiencing anger. So in this video, there'll be 16 ways you can meet anger with intelligence. Hi. Because the person who's angry can't remember even one of them. When you're cool, calm, and collected, maybe you can. But when you're angry, you can't remember a single one. So there are videos on stress and anxiety and so on. And this is the main program then. As Sudha was saying, it's the 5 circles of wisdom, or pillars of wisdom. One is to start with nurturing a quiet mind. We place a lot of emphasis on nature. So there are lots of nature meditations. And let me play this one for you on looking without language. It's only 1 minute.
Now I know this is Holly, but when I start to look at it without language, without labeling it as Holly, and everything that Holly is linked to in my mind, I forget all that. And I just tune in to the way this leaf curls up and down and up and down, the sharp spikes at the end, and the density of this leaf, the deep green color and the more yellowy veins, so neatly and almost symmetrically dividing it. The shine of the rain on it. When I go deep into this, I notice that my mind has gone completely still, and it's such a peaceful feeling.
So that's the art of looking without language. And again, a really useful skill to learn to deal with stress, anxiety, and all that. So we have a number of nature meditations and breathing exercises, journaling, and a formal meditation practice. All of this, by the way, a 16-year-old and above is completely fine with, that we've tested it on 16-year-olds. So we know how to look at the heavens, but we don't know how to look at ourselves. So the art of inquiry, as Sudha was saying, has just 3 simple steps: to observe, say, I'm feeling jealous, to accept and take ownership of the feeling. So it's not caused by Sudha telling me about her holiday. I park that blame thing for a minute, and I'm just curious, why do I feel this way? So I take ownership of the feeling. But the 3rd step, which opens the door to wisdom, is to ask why. What's going on in my thinking to make me feel jealous? And it's that question that opens the door to wisdom. And all that does is then we wake up and realize my mind is comparing all the time, unconsciously. And as I watch it, then I come to a point where it only compares where I need it to, and not automatically. And so I'm free. I don't feel jealous at all. If Sudha's gone on an amazing holiday, I say, thank you very much. How was the holiday? And so on. It doesn't affect me like it would if I wasn't aware of what's happening in my own thinking. So we talk about insight, awareness, no judgment, how to ask questions, how to look without language. But the core of the program is how the mind works. So for example, take conditioning. It's so simple. So what is conditioning? It's just our influences from childhood stored in our memory. We react from this database of memories, and it becomes the me. And it becomes our identity. It becomes Manoj and Sudha and all of you here. And how does it impact our life? Just look at that. So unconsciously, we've all been conditioned. I'm English, you're Indian, and so on. All our opinions come from here. Right? You like Brexit, I don't like Brexit. You like Donald Trump, I don't like Donald Trump, and all of that. Our beliefs, all our religious beliefs, which we become so attached to, and therefore I'm right and you're wrong. You see how powerful that is in the world? All the aspirations for our life. When I go to inner city schools in England and I ask little children, a 10-year-old girl told me, Dominic, and I'm sure you'll relate to this, that all I want to do when I become 16 is to have a baby. And that's not linked to her real aspiration, that's her conditioning. So the biggest gift we can give a child after love is wisdom, because that wisdom is their ladder then to go to wherever they want to in life. And actually, when I talk about children, I'm talking about us too. So adult, we're the same human being. That's all. It causes us to become attached to our identity, our political beliefs. You know, if you're a Tory, you grow up hating people who, labor, and the other way around. And in America and in India and everywhere in the world, it's the same thing. We become so attached. But the more identities you have, the less peace there is in the world. So if you're a human being who wants to live with peace, we have to let go of our attachment to our different identities. Doesn't mean you stop being English or Indian, but our attachment to it gets weakened. It causes anxiety. If I've been hurt before, I become afraid of being hurt again. Affects our behavior. We carry the memory of all our past sorrows. We don't need to, but our conditioning automatically makes us do that. All the habits we have come from our conditioning. I grow up in a house where there's a lot of drinking, I start drinking, or smoking, or taking drugs, whatever it might be. Every prejudice we have comes from our conditioning. I don't like black people, white people, yellow people. I don't like people of this religion, that religion. When you wake up, that you realize these ideas are not your own. They've come from outside, from your conditioning. You're free. You're free of all prejudices. You don't have to have one solution for prejudice against gay people, another one for transgender, and all of that. And criticism. So conditioning is a really powerful, and understanding it. By the way, it's not wrong. Nothing we're talking about is right or wrong. We're just saying at the moment it's operating without our awareness. In the same way, our mind compares all the time. So you can see we've got a huge module on comparison. It's one of our biggest. How it affects relationships. What are the benefits of it? How can we respond with wisdom? How can we explore it? And we have some role play scenarios. I work with a local theater company. So I'll just play this for you.
I haven't seen you for ages. How are you? It's been too long. Yes, it has. I'm really well, thank you. How are you doing? Well, I'm all right. A bit stressed. But no, I'm fine, really. What have you been up to? Oh, well, Peter and I just returned from 2 weeks holiday in Barbados. It was fantastic. Barbados? Wow, that must have been amazing. It was marvellous. We stayed in this beautiful hotel 2 minutes away from the whitest beach you have ever seen. Couldn't have had a better trip. Sounds fantastic. Yes, it was wonderful. I feel so much better. You know what it's like to completely relax? No, not really. Not since we started paying for the kids to go to uni. Oh, what about you? Have you done anything nice recently? Well, money's a bit tight, to be honest, at the moment for things like that. I've been to the coast a few times with Mark, but that's about it, really. Oh, well, that can be really nice. I remember when we were on the beach in Mykonos. Oh, okay, enough about your amazing holidays. It's irritating enough to hear you wax lyrical about it first time round. I don't need to hear chapter and verse about every little thing you did on your marvellous island.
So then we go on from there to ask people questions. So the next question would be, put yourself in her shoes, and how do you think she was feeling before she met Sharon, and so on. So we ask people a series of questions. I do that with children too, by the way, and we do some role play scenarios with children. Though this is the adult version of the app, we're also developing one for little children under 11 and one for teenagers from 12 to 15. Okay, then the mind's reactive. We operate from self-interest. You know, if you're in education or you're a CEO of a company and your number one skill you need is integrity, right? And if you want to live with integrity, you can't unless you're aware of your self-interest operating in the background. It's part of being human, but it's hidden from our own awareness. So the moment you wake up to it and you see it there, then you can live with integrity. Otherwise, it is going to hijack whatever intentions you might have for yourself. And you can see that in public life, but I'm sure privately we're no different. You know, in the last century, we human beings killed 200 million of our own. We're the only species in the world that's as violent and that does that. And all of that killing occurred because you're different to me. Your identity was different to mine. You were German, I was British. You were Japanese, I was Indian, and so on. If we realize deep down we're the same human being, we wouldn't do that. So this module explores how identities come into being unconsciously, why they serve a purpose, how we get attached to them, and so on. All our relationships that don't work out are because of our unmet emotional needs. And again, they operate in the background. So again, we explore that in depth. And by the way, everything I'm talking about here, 10 and 12-year-olds get it like that. It's so self-evident. So nothing we're saying, by the way, is got to be believed. If I say that's a pen, it's only a pen if you see it clearly yourself. If you don't see it, I say, don't believe me. So therefore, no authority operates in this program. There's nobody saying, think this or do that. It's just an invitation for you to ask your own questions and learn about yourself. So if I say your mind's comparing all the time, it's only true if you see it clearly yourself. Then we understand emotions. So interesting about pleasure. People don't realize that the nature of pleasure is the same in all human beings, which is it's fleeting, right? Let me tell you about a conversation I had with children. Just take 1 minute. I said, and by the way, that's very true for adults as well. And it's got the answer to global warming. So that's a clue. So I asked these children, I said, what makes you happy? And they said, ice cream, holidays, Christmas presents, birthday presents. I said, fine. I said, how long does the pleasure last? Oh, not long. As soon as the ice cream's over, and if I open the present, I see what it is, I lose interest in it. I said, what do you feel once the pleasure ends? By the way, all this is on video, so you can watch it yourself. And they said, we feel bored, empty, restless. I said, what do you need to do next? Well, we need to repeat the pleasure. But how is it different this time? Oh, it needs to be bigger and better. I said, are you aware of all this going on? They said, no, we're not. And the teacher who's in the room, by the way, these are 10-year-olds, said, I'm into shoes. And I've got 176 pairs of shoes. And she said it with great happiness, that that's her hobby, shoes. Didn't see the irony. So then I asked the children, I said, what impact does that have on your families? And they said, we have no food to eat sometimes. Our parents go into debt. And I said, what impact is it going to have on the planet? And they say pollution, global warming, you know, right? Because after all, scientists are saying the same thing, that consumption is driving global warming. So I said, what's the answer then to climate change? And this 10-year-old said to me, well, we need to consume less. I said, what about pleasure? Because we need pleasure. She said, maybe we could do things that don't involve buying things. I said, like what? She said, like playing with our friends or going for a walk. Right? But then I said, put it all on the board. I said, what's the other thing we could do? If we could do that, we could prevent this problem of global warming. And this girl at the back said, if we could find an answer to our inner boredom, we wouldn't need to consume so much and there'd be less pollution. So I said, what's the answer? And I just stayed there. I didn't say a thing. I was sitting quietly for 5 minutes because she didn't know the answer, but she held the question. And then she said, if I stay with it, it goes away. Can you see the profound beauty in that and the profound implications of that for the world? That at the moment, the human mind consumes things on the outside to make it feel good on the inside. That's what the mind is doing all the time. If we could find a way of feeling good on the inside, using this understanding and wisdom, then we wouldn't need to consume so much on the outside to feel good on the inside. I mean, that's just such a profound implication for the planet, and it comes from children, just from asking questions. Anyway, so that's understanding emotions, and then we can take this understanding and apply it to different areas of our life, whether it's stress or relationships, love, criticism, self-esteem, living with peace or dealing with death, happiness, communication, success and failure, addiction, food, money, work, leadership. But then you can also take this understanding and apply it to solving global problems like climate change. I've just said racism, which is just prejudice conditioning. 50% of healthcare appointments are because of stress. We can address that. We can end war because you and I would see we're the same human being. You know, my right hand would not go to war with my left hand. And we could transform education. So children also grew up with an understanding of themselves and the world, not just the world. At the moment, it's just the outside, but they also grew up with this living understanding of the inside. Let's take a moment to explore this subject, stress, which is such a common problem. 80% of us say we're moderately or severely stressed, and it's responsible, as I said, for 50% of medical appointments, right? So what's the answer? So stress is just the difference between, this module is one of our biggest, it's got about 300 screens. It's just the difference between how things are and how we want them to be. And how we want them to be comes from our unconscious conditioning. So let's look at the internal causes of stress. So it's not the problem that causes suffering, it's the way we think about it. That was Byron Katie. And of course, the external causes of stress are well known, money, health, and so on. So the first thing is conditioning. Right? It's just the difference between, as I said, how things are and how we want them to be. And this occurs unconsciously, which is why we have little control over the stress reaction. So the moment you start understanding and exploring your own conditioning, you start becoming free of many of these internal drivers. Or your mind compares all the time. Someone's got a bigger house, better car, and immediately, before you know it, you're stressed because your mind's comparing. If you can train your mind not to compare, a big chunk of your stress disappears. Or all our unmet desires. I wanted to be a ballet dancer, but I'm just a ticket collector. So if we can make peace with who we are and where we are in the world, and again, it comes from living with this wisdom, you can be free of that stress. Or I think that acquiring that new car is going to make me happy. And if I don't get that new car, then I become unhappy. But if we understand the nature of, by the way, pleasure is not wrong, but we understand it at its depth, we can be free of that too. And what about fear? It shapes our lives in so many unconscious ways. By the way, fear in college-going students is 44%. Anxiety-related disorders in college or teenagers, older teenagers, is 44%. Imagine if we could teach them how to respond to fear, how to learn and understand fear at its depth. like that 10-year-old girl, they too could be free. Because she understood that fear is just her imagination playing up. But of course, all this requires great inquiry. It's not just something you can give on a plate to somebody. They have to do their own learning and journeying. So understanding and accepting whatever the future brings can help reduce stress and anxiety. All our unmet emotional needs cause so much stress. I want to be listened to, but I don't have the same need to listen. I want to be loved. When we talk about with dating and romantic, we talk about I'm looking for love. We never say I'm looking to give my love to somebody. So all our emotional needs, which are unknown, unhidden from us, cause all this pain. So that's that. And you could go on. I'll leave you to look at that yourself. Or how can we meet stress with wisdom? So this understanding then suggests different ways in which you can be free of stress. So the first thing you can do is change yourself. As Sudha was saying, breathe, pause, slow your reaction down. Nurturing a quiet mind allows you to do that. This gives you time to respond with intelligence. And we can train even little children to do that. Or zoom out, regain perspective. Stress is just like a pin in your finger. It makes you zoom into the problem and you lose perspective. You failed an exam, that becomes the end of your world, you jump off a bridge. But if you were able to zoom out, you'd say, I've still got my health, my family loves me, I'm going to sit the exam again, I'll be fine. But you need to train your mind to zoom out, and we can educate ourselves and children to do that. Is there another way of seeing something? I did this beautiful podcast last week about problems, and the first thing to ask yourself is it a problem? If I just walk around it and look at it from another point of view, is it still a problem? It may not be, because I've just changed perspective. Or is there another way to respond? Do I need to say something, or can I just keep quiet? In our communication module, we ask this question a lot. Do we need to say something? And what are the occasions when you need to say nothing at all? And often there's a long list. Someone's telling you about their particular prejudice, you don't have to respond, or their opinion. Why have your own opinion? You don't need to have one. You could respond to someone who's angry by just saying sorry, for example. Or because stress is just the difference between how things are and how we want them to be, accepting how things are can dissolve stress. It's so simple. How someone is stacking the dishwasher, how someone's behaving, someone's particular preference and what they want to eat or who they want to be. If we can just accept that difference, our stress dissolves. It's so simple, but it's something that we never even consider. Or here's the other big tip. Stress is like a fire in your brain, and it makes you want to escape from it. Right? And how do we escape from stress? We escape through pleasure. Right? And what are the things that bring us pleasure? Well, we've got alcohol, we've got drugs, and all of those things. Because we don't know how to deal with stress, we escape. That's what young people are doing. In the United States last year, 93,000 people died from drug overdoses. That's more than all the wars that America's fought in the last 50 years. And it's only because of this, because we have not been educated to understand how to deal with stress without escaping from it. One of our coaches in the States, Joseph Polaro, was a drug addict for 20 years, and now he's a coach for 10. He said, Manoj, if I had this understanding that's in this program when I was a young boy, I would have not wasted those 20 years of my life. So that's why this work we're doing is got profound implications for society as a whole and for individuals. And so on. So I'm going to not go through the whole thing, but I'll let you do that. So I think I've spoken for long enough, Sudha. Maybe we should pause here.
Sure, Manoj.
And we should maybe invite some questions and
Yes,
some
absolutely.
comments.
Right. So that was a lot of sharing, a lot of learning and understanding. And every time I hear, trust me, Manoj, I feel so excited. I feel it's like, refreshing, totally. And it touches so deeply inside. It questions our whole purpose of existence. And I think it's the most purest form of purpose, human wisdom, with the right intention, which makes it so different. And it's applicable to any age group, any profession, any human being. Great.
Yes.
Yes. So let's open for questions.
Yeah, just put your hand up, Padma Kumar.
Yeah. Hi, Padma. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Sudha. How are you doing?
Doing great, Padma. Great to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. So first off, thank you so much. That was so much of wisdom that you shared with us in the last 1 hour. And kudos on the phenomenal work that you've done in creating this app. It shows the level of commitment and the amount of work that has gone into creating this. My question is, if we look at it from a continuum perspective, the wisdom directly, immediately addresses our intellectual knowing of things. So when, for example, I go through the app, or I read up, or I listen to videos, or listen to podcasts, it addresses my knowing part of it. However, there are deep-seated beliefs that some of which we are aware of and many of which we are not aware of as well. And this infusion of wisdom by listening to things, to what extent can it seep through and impact what I believe in? That's one part. And on the other part, what I do, again, is very different from what I know should be done. If you ask a lot of people, they'll say, oh, it's wrong to fight wars, it's wrong to take drugs. They know it all. They know what are the right things to do. But then, in actual fact, when people start doing things, it's at variance with what they even know to be right. Now, how do we really bridge this gap in terms of the continuum, beliefs to what we know, to what we do?
Okay, so you've asked a really beautiful question, which goes to the heart of what we're talking about. Wisdom is not like knowledge. Right? With wisdom, you can change with knowledge, you can change a flat tire. Right? But wisdom cannot be imparted like that. So I'll give you an example. Here's a glass of water. And here are 1,000 books that tell you what water tastes like. You can read all those 1,000 books. You can repeat them. You can get a PhD in them. You can become a saint or a guru, but you're never going to know what water tastes like. You're only going to know by drinking it. Similarly, you're only going to discover wisdom by actually looking and learning about yourself. So that means actually, that's why the program is structured the way it is. The art of inquiry, the nurturing a quiet mind, how to look at yourself, then to accept what you find, realize you're the same human being. So it's a journey. All we are doing is giving people a roadmap and holding their hand as we walk with them. But the journey you have to take. A better analogy, you'll never learn to swim by standing on the side of the swimming pool, watching people swim. You have to get in the water, see. And as educators, and as we have to help children do that. That's why we have coaches. That's why we have this detailed program. And to say, Baba, don't be frightened. It's a bit same thing. It's like you've never swum before. You're scared of getting in the water, right? But once you get in and start, it's easy. So same thing here. Let's say, hold your hand. Come on, let's go. It's going to be fine. That way. Does that address your question? And once you start learning and looking, then You don't need to do anything else. The change comes automatically.
Yeah, so I do fully understand that, it's the experience doing it that can potentially also change our beliefs. But some of those beliefs are so deep-seated and deep-rooted that we are not even aware of what we believe. The
Correct.
belief is there inside.
Yes.
So does this also help to uncover those beliefs that we don't even know exist within ourselves?
The key thing is this: do you have a mind that is open to learning? See, so that's why we're preparing you for this journey too. We're saying first be curious, then have a mind that's open to learning. Most of our minds are closed. Even now when I'm speaking, you're only receiving that which you already know. What you don't know, your mind is automatically blocking. You see? But on the other side of this is such beauty, joy. Living with this wisdom is the most beautiful thing you can imagine. All the things the heart desires are not out there, but already in here. See, that's what we have to just help people to understand. Dominic.
Thank you, Padma, for that excellent question. Thank you.
Thanks, Manoj. That was inspiring. Actually, it was fantastic. It's wonderful to hear. There's a lot of work I think I've been doing personally around this for myself, as I can only do. And one of the words that's come through, I suppose, my reflections is the word surrender. And I just like to hear your thoughts around that. And I think that it's possibly twofold as well. I was head of a Catholic primary school, and so there's an element there of faith and spirituality within that. And I just wonder, because it's not for everybody clearly, and we all have our different ways of looking at that. So the surrender for me came alongside faith as well. And I just wondered, I'd just like to hear your thoughts around how that can fit into this.
Yeah, you see, surrender could also be another. Words, by the way, are limited. So our whole communication module is worth exploring, because we react to the words being spoken without pausing to reflect on what does a person mean? What is the meaning behind the words being spoken? Surrender could be another word for acceptance. I accept myself as I am. I accept you as you are. And in that acceptance lies peace. So much of our stress can melt away. So much of our conflict can disappear. Right? I think this inquiry offers also another way of discovering the sacred in your day-to-day life. And by the way, this is true for human beings who have asked questions of the life they live for thousands of years. They were ordinary human beings, by the way. St. John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, Ramana Maharishi, Krishnamurti, the Zen masters, the Sufi saints. So though your inquiry may begin in, why am I stressed? Or why am I feeling jealous? Or why can we not have relationships without conflict? Or why do we spend $1.6 trillion on arms when 1 billion people go hungry every year? Why are human beings so afraid of each, and so on, right? But that inquiry, and that's probably a separate conversation. I'm happy to have it, but it also leads to a discovery of the sacred in our day-to-day life. And that's beyond language. That space, the word sacred is not sacred, but what it points to doesn't have a word. Right? And that comes from this inquiry, from understanding the nature of the I and all of those things.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. That was an interesting question. It's quite interesting, Manoj, that the way we look at the words and the way we understand them differs from person to person. Surrendering and acceptance, and the perception that we create towards those identities or those specific areas defines our learning or conditioning or the way approach happens towards many things. So it's really a very interesting concept. More we explore, the more we understand. Sure, thank you. Thank you for the
One
question.
more thing to say, Dominic, was that the reason for all this conflict, my religion versus your religion, is because we've just read the books. We've not taken the trouble to drink the water. If we drink the water, we don't need the book. See, that's the beauty of this work. And that's why it could bring humanity together, to explore this shared humanity we feel. It's very simple, but the implications are profound. Then there'd be no Catholic and Protestant anymore, right? There'd just be this deep connection as human beings, you know? And then that's a space. The Quakers say that. It's the God in me trying to meet the God in you. So human beings of different traditions around the world have explored the same thing and asked the same questions. All we're trying to do is democratize it and simplify it and take the mystical element out of it and make it simple so a child understands. You know, but the implications of it are profound. Could end war, for example. We've never been able to do that in humanity's history.
Just one comment on that you mentioned there. You said to make it simple so a child understands. I actually think it's the other way around. I think we need to make it simple so an adult understands. I think the children have got it.
Children, you're right. Yes. That's very well put. Any other questions or comments? Gopalan.
Yeah. It was a matter of time. Yeah. I enjoyed the sharing. It's very illuminating. And the thing that has come for me is that knowledge is always in the past, isn't it? It's something we acquire, we learn. But wisdom is something that is innate. It's the same wisdom that resides in a 10-year-old or a 6-year-old that resides in us. And we must be prepared to acknowledge and accept that we need to discover that for ourselves. As you have correctly pointed out, that we are looking for something outside of us to fill that emptiness that is inside of us. And that's why pleasure and whatever we look for outside in a relationship is not sustainable. We need to find that within us, which basically means, do you understand how your mind works and why what is that's going on when somebody said you're stupid, or I will only interact with you if you interact with me. That means you are depending on an outside inject before you offer the same to the other person. Giving without accepting, without expecting, because it all goes back to acceptance and expectations. Acceptance without the need to have it reciprocated, to allow it to happen as a natural thing. So that's and this is something that I've related to through my journey in life as well. That I find that if I sit with it long enough, if somebody said something, all I needed to do was ask myself, what's happening there for me? is there even a need to respond? Because we tend to listen, we tend to listen to respond rather than listen to understand what's going on. And in that itself is quite profound.
But on a more practical level, this is really wonderful for young people because it's in your pocket at all times. Anytime you have a challenge, you can just pick it up and have a different perspective, and there are things there to calm your mind immediately, and then things to find out. So it's a bit like saying, here's a fire extinguisher to help put the fire out, and then we're going to find out why it started in the first place, so it doesn't start tomorrow and day after and continue, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy, because the mind is trained to think everything it feels is because of what's happening outside. And it's really difficult for us to accept that most of the time it comes from these unconscious patterns of thinking on the inside. And but the beauty in that is that you can become the master of ending your own stress. It doesn't depend on you changing for me to feel less stressed. See, I can change my reaction and then my stress disappears. So I can change the way I respond. So that's the other big advantage. But the other big difference in this work is to realize understanding does all the work of bringing change. So let me give you an example. A simple one. Say I am jealous, and all the religions come along and say, hey, don't be jealous, or don't be stressed. Let's take stress. I'm stressed, and people say, don't be stressed. I don't know how not to be stressed. I read all the books, and it doesn't work. But I try my best to go from being stressed to not being stressed. And all my life I spend in this gap, or I feel guilty, or whatever. What we're saying is, let go of the ideal of not being stressed. Accept your stress to start with, and then let's find out what's going on in the deeper layers of our thinking to make us feel that way. And it's that penetrative inquiry that brings freedom. I'm no longer stressed. For example, my mind doesn't compare anymore. 50% of my stress is gone immediately. Or I accept the difference between you and me, that's another 30% gone, and so on. So it's this depth of understanding of ourselves and what's behind what we're thinking and feeling that brings freedom. So stress becomes an opportunity for learning. So does anxiety. So does the conflict in our relationship. Right? And in that learning, there's freedom. Okay, any other thoughts on that? Or so that maybe we could start winding up slowly if everyone is.
Yes, but just a quick check with everyone. Any more questions that you have?
Padma, do you have any? Yes, come
Yes.
back. Come on then.
So this is more a clarifying kind of a question. Does conditioning begin after a person is born, or is there some hereditary conditioning that also gets into the DNA? And even at the time that you're born, some residual conditioning from previous generations is a starting point.
So, just like when a duck is born, it knows how to swim. So we also carry, it's called the science of epigenetics. You should look it up. So some behavioral traits are passed from our parents. In fact, the whole thing began from a scientist in Chicago who was investigating inner city conflict and destitution, and why generation after generation was working and behaving in the same way. So there is something that comes down from our parents, hereditary. But the other beautiful thing is this intelligence can counter that. Living with this wisdom can counter that, because the brain is plastic. It's not fixed, you see. So there's a penetrative quality of insight when something is seen really clearly. See what I mean? When something is seen really clearly, it drops away, it changes. So our whole journey is preparing us for those moments of insight into ourselves, of learning. See, you've been an educator, Dominic, and so is Steve an educator, you know, and this whole journey is around learning. That's all. But instead of just learning about the world, you're also learning about yourself. And that then allows you to live without stress, anxiety, all of those things we talked about. So that's my passion, is to transform the world of education. So this learning about yourself becomes embedded all the way from 5 to 50, you know, all the way through university. It doesn't matter what subject you're studying, you're also studying yourself. And then we can have a generation that's completely different. Already in the schools I work in and the young people I work with, the young man told me, you know, Dominic, he said, this could be monumental for our generation. See? Because the understanding is simple. You know, once you have that insight, you're free. Once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. When you realize that our conflict comes from my conditioning and my attachment to the way I want things to be, it's gone. It's finished. Or my fear comes from my own thinking. It's not linked to my exams coming up or whether my wife is going to leave me or all of those. I'm going to die of cancer. Dominic.
Thanks. Yeah, just the thought of when you said about transforming education, obviously I would love to say that. I think it's definitely the way forward. How has it worked? I think children are really, really accepting of this, and I'm sure there will be. What about the teachers?
You know, it's really interesting that the teachers in a school are more stressed than the students are.
Yeah.
They're more anxious than the students are.
Absolutely.
So they find it really hard, but not impossible, to sit with the students and say, you and I are both stressed. We're both the same human being. We're both anxious. Let's talk about it. Let's explore it. So I've been working alongside teachers in schools and colleges. And, you know, this understanding is gentle. It's full of compassion. There's no force involved. See, that's the beauty of it. You know, I gave this talk to some students, college students, and Steve will recognize this, young people. And they said, we're talking about connection, depth of connection. And this boy said to me, why is it that I've got so many friends and I still feel lonely? And I was talking about how it's important to have depth of communication in our relationships. He says, I don't know how to do that. Nobody's ever taught me. And of course, as adults, that's one of the reasons why our relationships are so dysfunctional. We don't know how to communicate. So there's so much we can do. And the students are really interested in this, much more they are than in history and all these things, which are on their phone anyway, you know. And actually, as employers, employers don't care whether you come from Oxford or from Middlesbrough. They want to know whether you can get on with the team, get on with the job, work hard, not be too, all of the qualities that don't come from knowledge, but they come from wisdom. Every leadership quality we need comes from wisdom, not from knowledge. Every work skill that employers say they're missing, all the soft skills come from this work, not from pure knowledge. In fact, Newcastle University set up a whole division to teach soft skills because the employers are saying, you're coming out with all these degrees, but they can't last in a job for more than a few hours, and all that, right? Steve, you've been listening very patiently.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve. Well, it's been fascinating, actually. I was just actually, you pipped me to the post there. I think we get involved in teaching very much hard skills, and we get involved in showing people how to do things and not necessarily why we do things. And I think this work could be monumental in giving those young people resilience skills. And I sort of hesitated because that's been hijacked, the word resilience, recently. But as we're coming out of COVID, as we're coming out into a new way of learning, I think just to be able to build moments that people can have for themselves within the curriculum and understand their feelings, understand their emotions and where their wisdom comes from, I think will be extremely beneficial. And I definitely, love to start to help spread this word and start to move this forward.
Okay, well, thanks, Steve. I'll be in touch separately. We'll schedule something. Okay, so it's time to start winding things up. I'm just going to open the chat, and right at the top, I want to share a couple of links with you. The first is Linktree, and that's links to all our social media sites. We've got about 8 or 9. We post regularly, so we'd love you to follow us on that if you want to take note of that.
I'm just resharing it again, Manoj.
Okay, and the second is our podcast is on, but again, it's on the website too, on Human Wisdom, but it's podbean.com, and all our podcasts are there. And Sudha and Gopalan are now qualified Human Wisdom coaches. So Gopalan, if you want to put your email in the chat, that would be great. So if anyone wants to reach out to them for a conversation or a coaching conversation, you're very welcome. And Sudha's email is there. And Gopalan will just put his email in there. And if you are interested in what we're doing and would like to volunteer some time to help us share this with others, we'd be more than happy to hear from you. And I'll put my email down here. It's just info@humanwisdom.me. And this work has moved people. So one of our coaches in the US is in Atlanta in Georgia, and she knows the incoming mayor of New York. And she's told him that we should get it into all the New York City school system. So that's the kind of level in which we're talking. Yesterday, I spoke to a chief exec of Pixel, which is an organization here in the UK, and they work with 170,000 teachers. And the CEO totally gets it. She understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. She was in one of the primary schools where I was doing this work. We just bumped into each other. So again, we're talking about, how we could work together to scale it. So if you have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear from you. And just please drop us an email. But I really believe that, and as do so many people that I work with, that this understanding could help transform individual lives and the world if we are able to work with it in a really good way. So thank you so much. Do you have any closing comments, Sudha?
Thank you. Well, I can never fall short of that because it's been such an overwhelming feeling listening to the entire thing again and again. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all the participants who have spared their valuable time, taken their interest to be here and listen to us. And if you're serious and if you really feel this is something that you can take it up like a learning and a sharing, then please feel free to reach out to us. And we've shared our emails, and we'll be happy and glad to take this forward with you in this journey. And yes, any questions are most welcome offline as well. Manoj has been the pioneer, and he is definitely the owner and the master of the entire concept, the project. And I would like to thank Manoj, Dr. Manoj Krishna, again for his time, his patience, and his, the whole idea, his vision of making a difference, not only to the individual, but to the world as a whole. And thank you once again. We look forward to interacting with you more and you being a part of the program. Like I said, please take care, and we look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Sudha, thank you. One last comment before we go, which is, this is not Manoj's project.
It's everybody's, yes.
Very important to know.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to any religion or book or sect. It's the Human Wisdom Project. If a 10-year-old girl comes along, which they often do, and points something out which I didn't know before or didn't notice, it goes in the program. So the program is dynamic. So everybody who's involved can share their insights, and it'll get better and better over time. And I want it to last long after I've gone. So that's why it's going to be the Human Wisdom Project. And it'll be, nurtured by everybody who's part of it. Right? Because we share the same mind, you and me. We're just looking and learning and sharing what we learn, and that's all it is, right? So in that learning, though, is this awakening of wisdom which can transform our lives. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Manoj. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sudha. Thank you.